where is it in the dock? Where's the icon for it? Oh, okay. So I open that first, and then I open the lecture.
Right.
Okay. So I open that, and I hit record.
Yep. So basically, when you hit record, it does a 3-second countdown, and then it shrinks down to the dock, and it's running until you bring it back up and hit stop or pause.
Okay. So you could just ignore this part of the when you download it. All right. So then I go to this, and it goes up.
Start your.
Those of you who came in late, the lectures are being podcasted.
All right. That's it. Now I'm good to go.
Yep. And then when you're done, just hit stop.
Oh, right. Hit stop. I forgot about that.
On
Tim,
the,
remember when I'm done, hit stop.
On the Camtasia thing, hit stop.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, it'll take a few seconds to process it. And then there'll be a little thing that says submit.
Oh, okay.
And if you click that, it uploads your recording to the server.
Stop, submit.
And you can submit later if you want. It's not going to go away if you have to run or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Just next time you're on the internet, you can submit it.
Okay.
And we'll talk about what to do with it after that.
Okay. Did we make another time to talk? Oh, yeah, Thursday after class.
I can't be here, unfortunately.
Oh, that's right.
I'll give you a call.
All right, so we'll email.
We'll figure something out.
All righty.
Okay.
Is that okay? Enough ambient light? Can you guys see? Is this too dark?
A little bit.
It is a little bit too dark? Huh. Okay. Oh, yeah. Open up. Here, I'll close this one, and you guys open up some of those. Open up some of those back there and see if that helps. All right, whoops. And, yeah, open up one of the ones. Stephanie, open up one of the ones that's next to you there. Is that okay? Thanks. Okay. Thank you, John. All right. Here we go. Here we are. In this satellite view, you can see the territory that we are looking at. This is the eastern shore of the Mediterranean, the Great Mediterranean, which, of course, would continue all the way out there. Here's Greece, modern-day Turkey, Egypt down here. And you see even in the satellite view, the dramatic differentiation in the topography here. All of this darker territory is high land. Hi there, please take handouts. And the thin strip of fertile ground along the coastal plain. Israel, Palestine, Canaan, whatever you want to call it, and I will probably call it different names at different times, and I mean nothing by any of the names. So if anybody is invested in one or another of those names, that's fine. I am not. So just to make that clear. Israel, this territory here, is the western arm of the territory known as the Fertile Crescent. And you see the Fertile Crescent outlined here in the inset map. The crescent begins at the Persian Gulf, where the outflow of the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers are. This is ancient Mesopotamia. This zone is fertile because of the rivers that provide constant flow of water and irrigation. The Fertile Crescent is so called because the crest of it comes down on this arm, which is supplied not by river irrigation, but by rainfall that allows for a kind of agriculture that's known as dry farming, which is to say farming that doesn't require additional irrigation. Why is that so? Because the mountains that form the inner border of this zone cast what's called a rain shadow. All of the clouds and water that come through across the Mediterranean and across Turkey hit these mountains and drop their load. This is why Seattle and the Pacific Northwest are so watery, because there are mountains that go along down there, and the rain that comes across the Pacific hits the mountains and then dumps all of its rain. On the other side of the Cascades, it's arid, high steppe-land without a lot of water. It's a completely different topography. That's identical to this zone here. So the entire interior here, this interior, is in the rain shadow, and that means that it doesn't receive enough rainfall for sustainable agriculture. So this skinny little strip all along the eastern Mediterranean shoreline, everything that is between the coast and the mountains is exceptionally well watered because of that rain, and that forms the other arm of the Fertile Crescent. Now you're supposed to work. We have to look into that. All right, so the territory that we are talking about, and like I say, we're going to start to take a little tour, but here it is both in a Landsat view and in this topographic map. The two big natural bodies of water are both the result of the long river that runs down this seam, and that river is the Jordan, the River Jordan. And up at the top here is a freshwater lake, misnamed the Sea of Galilee, but that's what it's always called. And in Hebrew, it's called the Kinneret. You might have heard or run across that. That is from a Hebrew word, kinor, which means lyre. And that's because the shape of the Sea of Galilee, or the Kinneret, has been thought to resemble that of an ancient lyre. So the Kinneret, or the Sea of Galilee, is a freshwater zone here. There you see a little blue blip north of that. This is the Hula, H-U-L-E-H. In antiquity, there was a lake here. It's this valley. It's very swampy. It is just at the area where the Jordan River issues forth from the mountains of the Golan Plateau, which are right up in here. So there's this little Lake Hula, and then the Jordan River continues down, empties out into the Sea of Galilee, continues down, 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 onto the Dead Sea. In this map, the Dead Sea is very large. Today, the Dead Sea is almost just about half its size, the size that it was in antiquity. This is all silted up. The Dead Sea is the lowest spot on Earth and is salty, not freshwater, not able to drink. And that's because by the time the Jordan River gets down to this area, the climate is such that the evaporation, the amount of water that flows into the Dead Sea and the amount of evaporation that occurs because of the low point on Earth and the heat means that the saline levels in the Dead Sea stay higher than can support any life. So nothing lives in that. And the Jordan River continues south of the Dead Sea and then all the way down to the Gulf of Aqaba. For the most part, the Jordan River, the Dead Sea, the Sea of Galilee, and Lake Hula, this line, which is in geological terms the Jordan Rift Valley, that starts in Africa and continues all the way up into the Near East. For the most part, that is the edge of the territory that we will be examining in detail in this class. But for especially, well, no, actually for every period, now that I think about it, for every single period, there will be some sites in this region, which is the modern-day country of Jordan. And in the Iron Age, the first period that we're going to be looking at, in the Iron Age, this area has a very similar history, archaeological and historical, to what's happening over here. And so frequently there are sites that we'll be looking at that are over here because they happen to have a better preserved or more illustrative example of something that we'll be talking about. So ancient Israel, in the topographical sense, includes this entire region, including the area that's on the other side of the Jordan. The area that's on the other side of the Jordan tends to be called, and you will find this term in your readings, Transjordan. Trans, from the Latin prefix, meaning across, because from the point of view of the people who started studying the archaeology of this region, everything over here was on the other side. The person who wrote the article that's in your course pack for Iron 2, Larry Herr, terrific archaeologist, specialist in the later Iron Age, the Iron II, is a specialist in this region. And I don't actually remember if in the Iron II article that he wrote, he calls this area Transjordan, but a lot of people whose base of scholarship is in Jordan, called by most Israeli and Near Eastern archaeologists Transjordan, they tend to call this area here Cisjordan, CIS, which means the near side of the Jordan or the other side of the Jordan. So this is just these are just little scholastic games that some of the specialists in this area play, trying to undo what they perceive as a less than fair presentation of the ancient evidence. Again, for our purposes here, no agenda for any of this territory. I will tend to call this Jordan or Transjordan because I'm over 50 years old, and that's how I learned it, and that's how I talked about it for 40 years until all the Jordanian archaeologists got all bent out of shape and started calling it something else. So it's what I'm used to. All right. Maybe this needs a new battery. All right, we're going to start at the top. So on your maps, you will see the little dotted line at the top right where the border of Israel intersects with the Jordan River. Did you find that point? Where the border of Israel intersects with the Jordan River. If you would have a map that extended to the right of the Jordan River, you would be here in the Golan Heights, which is so-called from its ancient name, Gaulanitis. This is a territory that is currently held by Israel. It was awarded after World War I and World War II to Syria. For a while, it was a French province. The highest point here is Mount Hermon, and you can see it in the background of this slide. Mount Hermon is pretty much exactly at the point where that dotted line crosses the Jordan River, because it is from underneath and in front of Mount Hermon that the Jordan River starts. So this is the start of the Jordan River. The Golan is a high and well-watered plateau. The highest point is, I wrote all these down, 2,224 meters above sea level, just for those of you that care about that sort of thing, altitude. For the most part, when I'm showing you these images and we go from territory to territory, it will be like a very short and severe roller coaster ride. We'll be up way high, and then we'll go down way low. Up high, down low, up high, down low. The contrast is striking, and one of the reasons that I'm taking the trouble to show you these images is to, even if you can't remember all of these shots now, this is something that you'll have and you'll be able to look at the images afterwards. But the point is also that these contrasts in topography, so dramatic, so distinct, so obvious, and also so practically problematic. If you're up way, way high and there's a settlement down way low, it's not a hop, skip, and a jump to get from one to the other, and vice versa. These contrasts, generally speaking, make the borders, make the internal borders between tribal groups, cultural groups, political groups. This is how borders used to work before we had people fighting on the ground and then ceasefires happening and then everybody saying, okay, at the spot where I stopped, that's where the border is going to be. In the ancient world, borders were naturally occurring things that were generally produced by topographical distinctions like these. So if you're standing in the Golan, if you're standing at that little point where the Jordan River hits the northern border of Israel on your map, and you look down, this is what you see. This is the Hula Valley, ancient Lake Hula. It's a very high water table, obviously, and today has been, a lot of the water table has been harnessed for modern industries of fish ponds. But for many parts of its history, the Hula Basin was malarial and uninhabitable. And it was only in the periods when there were large-scale water clearing operations, draining operations, that people could live here. So it's not always occupied. But it does provide a break between the Golan and everything then that is to the north, southeast, west of it. Sorry, I'm geographically dyslexic. So whenever I am going to think about east-west, I have to do a little map in front of me. So when I do this, that's what I'm doing. And it hasn't gotten better. It doesn't seem to get better. All right. So the Hula provides a gap, a bulwark between the Golan and the next zone. At each of these junctures, at each of these topographical junctures, which are in essence border junctures, there tend to be big sites, big, huge sites. And these big, huge sites are critical in many periods. And all of the sites that I show you in this little topographical tour today are sites that we'll be visiting more than once, repeatedly, over the course of the semester. You need to know where they are. Once we get done with this nice tour, and I just say, all right, so at Tel Dan, there was blah, 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 you have to know where Tel Dan is. So all of the sites that you see today, make sure you get them on your map. Here's the first one, Tel Dan. Tel Dan marks the edge of, it's at the northern edge of the Hula Valley, right below where the Golan ends. So it is down in the valley, but right at the edge of the highlands. And you can see, in fact, this is the Hula Valley. Here's the Golan Heights. And the ground is already coming up. We're in the north looking down, looking to the south of Tel Dan. So this enormous site was a bulwark for the upper edge of this lowland area. And if anybody would be coming down from the Golan, they would run right into Tel Dan. This would be the very first place that they would get to. So, okay, you good with that? Got it on your map? On the other side of the Hula Valley, to the west of the Hula Valley, is the beginning of an enormous highland area that actually stretches in parts all the way to the Mediterranean coast, and that is the area of the Galilee. The Galilee of Israel is divided into two parts, a higher northern part and a lower southern part. The higher northern part is called Upper Galilee because it's higher. The highest point is Mount Meron. It's 1,208 meters above sea level. And it is very well watered, high upland valleys, but very, very rocky, very rural in all periods, including modernity, including today. And you can see why. It's just not a place where you can have a big vista, stretch out, and have some enormous site occupying and controlling some easily viewed area. All of these high mountains and upland valleys make for small settlements. Think Appalachia, for example. The Upper Galilee extends to the valley of the Jordan River. At the northern end of it is the Hula. At the southern end of it is the Sea of Galilee. And it goes right down to it. And here you see a little view of the hills of the Upper Galilee and the Jordan River cresting through. The site that controls the Galilee, for the most part, in this, it's on its eastern side, at the Jordan River side, is Hatzor. You're looking here at an aerial view. Here is the upper mound. Here is the lower city. This is actually an artificial built-up city of the Middle Bronze Age, so 2nd millennium BCE. An enormous site that we'll be getting to pretty shortly and returning to repeatedly. Hatzor is exactly at the demarcation between the upper and the lower Galilee on the eastern edge of the Galilee, looking down towards the Jordan River. So, like Dan, it marks a number of edge points in a complicated topography. If you go south from Hatzor, through the hills of the lower Galilee, then you get to the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee, which you see here, beautiful freshwater expanse, but not that large, as you can tell from this view, which is taken from the northwestern edge and looking already to the southeastern side. So you can see easily across it, and in fact you could, if you were a pretty good swimmer without too much trouble, swim across it. People do this on a Saturday morning. They go to beaches on one side of the Kinneret and swim across it and then swim back. So it's a pretty modest lake, even especially by Minnesota standards. The lower Galilee, much less dramatic in its topography than the upper Galilee, as you see here. Lower hills, wider valleys, gentler rises, and altogether easier for a large city to dominate a broader area. Like with the Hula and the Golan, the Galilee is demarcated by a big valley. The big valley is the Jezreel. This is sometimes called in biblical translations the Esdraelon Valley. You may have seen that term. The Jezreel is a huge, long expanse. You can find it on your map because it's the big yellow swath below the green and blue highlighted heights of the Galilee. So you see that big yellow swath? It cuts diagonally from the Mediterranean coast all the way to the Jordan River and provides a natural passage east-west. The Jezreel Valley edges at its southern side in the Carmel Mountains. And here is a view of the Monastery of Elijah on the height of the Carmel Mountains, which I think I wrote down here somewhere. Carmel. Oh, I didn't write down the height. Sorry about that. But you can see the Jezreel down in the distance here, easily spotted, obviously very low. And the Carmel, like the Jezreel, is sort of diagonal line that, again, demarcates the Jezreel on its southern side. Because the Jezreel provides east-west passage and the Carmel cuts essentially all the way to the coast, if you're coming up the southern from the south by sea or by land on the coastal plain, which we haven't looked at yet, or you're coming from the north, like Alexander the Great did, or Napoleon Bonaparte, or General George Allenby, and you come down, you come across at the Jezreel, and then there's a pass through the Carmel Mountains, a little diagonal pass, and that allows you to cut through those mountains without having to climb all the way up and all the way down. It's about halfway down, and you can see a river on your map. You can see a river marking the southern edge of the Jezreel, and then that river has a little fork. That fork is where the pass is. And at that pass is this site, Megiddo, ancient Armageddon, an extremely critical site for just about every period of the country, and obviously situated, again, like all of these other large sites, at a crossroads and a natural border between a lot of topographic zones. Once you go through the pass, you're scot-free. You're on the nice, fertile, flat, easily traversed coastal plain that then continues to extend all the way, well, essentially to Egypt, all the way up and down the eastern Mediterranean seaboard. So the Carmel Mountains are here in the distance, and that pass is actually right about there. And once you come down, you're in this, like I say, this broad coastal plain. This site here is the site of Caesarea, founded by Herod the Great. It was a little village in earlier times called Strato's Tower. You don't have to worry about that, but eventually you'll be learning about it. And you can see how easy and how easy it is to travel through here, and also the fertility of the coastal plain. The coastal plain is a longitudinal zone, stretches from the Carmel south all the way down. The next north-south longitudinal zone, south of the Jezreel Valley, are the Central Hills. The Central Hills are divided by climate, by topography slightly, but most certainly by politics, into a northern and a southern region. The northern region, named after the capital city that was founded in the time of the divided monarchy of the Iron Age, which is Samaria. That's the capital city. The northern hill country is called Samaria, the region as a whole, in addition to the site. The Samaritan hills, the northern hills, are high. The highest point is 945 meters. They're well watered. They are there's a amount of rainfall below which you can't do sustainable farming, and that's about 400 millimeters of rainfall a year. And this zone up here gets about 700 millimeters of rainfall a year. So there's just about never a time when you can't do dry farming in this zone. It's very, very fertile. And there are wide upland valleys, as you can see here, high hills. Agricultural terraces, such as these, support main Mediterranean crops, especially olive trees. And the largest city in this zone of the northern hill country is this site right here, ancient Samaria. This zone is primarily the area of Samaria, and the northern Samaritan hills is about 2/3 of the modern-day West Bank, the area that you know of as the West Bank. I mean, from modern events. West Bank, from the point of view of Jordan, because from the point of view of Jordan, this area is west of the Jordan River, and so it's the West Bank of the Jordan. If you go south, if you stay up on this high central area, but you just continue to go south, you get to the southern part of the hill country, which is ancient Judah, Yehud in Hebrew or Aramaic, Judea in its Roman incarnation. And you can see from the topography, it's still very high, but it's much drier. The rainfall starts to drop off, so it's less consistently fertile. There can be periods of drought. There can be periods when it's not possible to have sustainable agriculture in this zone. And the main city of the southern part of the Central Hills is Jerusalem, seen here from the air, looking east toward the Jordan River Valley and Jordan, modern-day Jordan, which is in the mists back there. South of Jerusalem, in the southern Judean hills, it quickly becomes a high, arid desert. And you're looking here at what is sometimes, this is the zone that you may conjure up in your mind if you read a biblical description of the wilderness. This is a very dry, very arid, very high, very rugged territory that extends essentially down to the Jordan River Valley, to the Dead Sea, which you see here, towards its southern end. So all of this, in this direction here, would be a continuation of the image that you just saw before. As you see, those Judean highlands just stop precipitously, more or less right at the edge of the Dead Sea. You can see this road that traverses the border. This is the site of Masada, fortress of Herod the Great and some site that was held by Jewish rebels in the time of the revolt against Rome until they were defeated. This is the Roman siege ramp that was built for anybody that saw the HBO talk program on Masada. So there are sites down in this area, but of course it's more problematic for people here to support themselves. They have to have cisterns and wells and other sources of water. On the eastern side of the Judean hill country, going down towards the coastal plain on in its southern extent, is a large region of rolling hills. I always think of Ohio for some reason. Kind of gentle topography. This zone is a kind of border zone between the highlands of Judah and the lowlands of the coastal plain down in the southern part of the country. And it's called, in Hebrew, the Shvelah. The Shvelah is a word that means shoulders. So the shoulders are the low bumps between your head and the rest of your body, I guess. And that's hence the name for this zone here, the Shvelah. And there are a lot of large sites in the Shvelah because it's a very welcoming area for growing things and for living. It's very easy, close to the coast for transport and trade, close to the central hills for quarries, for stone. And so there are a lot of large sites. This is one that we'll be looking at pretty soon. Tel Mikne, which is ancient Ekron. That's its ancient name. And you see the site here. This is the Acropolis of the site. In this aerial view, it's a little flattened, so you can't really tell that this part is higher than this part here. But anyway. And down into the southern coastal plain, again, like the northern coastal plain, just a straight shot, very easy, very fertile, very livable. This is this coastal plain, the southern and the northern coastal plain, and then through the pass through the Carmel and up through Megiddo into the Jezreel. This is the topographic highway of the country. Everybody from ancient Egyptian pharaohs, Merneptah and Ramses III, through Nebuchadnezzar, the Assyrian combatants, through Alexander the Great and Napoleon Bonaparte. This is the route they travel, straight down the coastal plain on land. So the highway that runs down this part of the country is called, and again you'll find this in your reading, is called the Via Maris, the way of the sea. Via Maris is Latin. The Via Maris, the way of the sea, V-I-A, new word, M-A-R-I-S, is the route that travels down the edge of the country. A lot of big sites in the coastal plain. Here's one of the biggest, Ashkelon. Here are its ramparts. So this entire enormous semicircle is the site. Actually, and you can see some darker color here in the water, the coastline has receded somewhat, so it didn't always used to be right here, and parts of the site actually have eroded away. Excavations in various sectors here just peter out at the beach because parts of the site have just disappeared into the Mediterranean. On the southern edge of the Judean hills in the Shvelah, in the middle of the country, and I think essentially off your map. So more or less, yeah, definitely off your map. So, oh, I see what the problem is when they printed this out. The whole thing didn't print out. So you don't even have the southern Dead Sea. Sorry about that. Okay, well, below that little 987 meter high bit in the purple down at the bottom, just below it, if you would continue down, you would get the whole southern half of the country. This is only the northern half of the country on your map. And in the southern half of the country is desert, and between the Judean hills and the real desert is this site, ancient Beer Sheva, modern Tel Sheva, excavated, almost completely excavated, which is how come it looks like you could be walking in the street here, which you could be walking in the ancient street. And below it, south of Tel Sheva, another huge expanse of the country, about equal to what is on your map, of just an enormous arid expanse called the Negev Desert. It is across the Negev that most trade transport occurred, beginning in the 2nd millennium BCE, when camels were semi-domesticated. And it was camel caravans that moved across this territory from the Negev, which is this triangle here, across northern Sinai Peninsula, seen from the Landsat satellite, across the area of what is today the Suez Canal, and into the territory of Egypt. You'd just be able to make out the delta and the Nile of Egypt. And of course, in biblical terms, that's where the story begins. In biblical terms, it was these great architectural projects that the ancient Israelites labored on for many, many generations, until through a series of episodes and miracles, they were brought forth from Egypt in the biblical chronology sometime in the 15th or 14th century BCE, led by Moses. In the account in Exodus and repeated in Deuteronomy, usually the map is made taking the Israelites through the southern part of Sinai and then back up again, skirting the Negev largely, coming around the eastern edge of the Jordan River, and ending with Moses at this point, which is Mount Nebo in modern-day Jordan, about 700 meters above sea level, looking west, where the Israelites were told that, and Moses was told that he would not be going with them, but that this was the territory to which they should push themselves forward. And in the biblical account, of course, it's not an uninhabited territory. There are a lot of people living here. There are people living in large cities. The Israelites band together and move in. There are two biblical accounts of what goes on at this point, encompassed in two books, the books of Joshua and Judges. In the book of Joshua, it's all about fighting. The Israelites storm a series of cities and take them and establish hegemony over essentially the central hills, the hills of Samaria and Judah. In the book of Judges, they move in slowly, settle down in small villages. And for the last 100 years or so, since archaeology started in this neck of the woods, archaeologists have looked to prove one or the other of those books. That's been what archaeology has been about in Israel. Who were the Israelites? How did they get here? Which biblical book is correct? Did they take the land by conquest, or did they take the land eventually quietly infiltrating small piece by small piece? In the last 25 or 30 years, scholarship on the archaeology of this zone has metamorphosed from attack that begins with the Bible to a different conception where the stories that we have in the Hebrew Bible are one kind of narrative, one kind of history, compiled and collected over time for certain reasons. And the material evidence, the archaeology, is another kind of history. And looking at them side by side allows us to build a picture that actually makes sense. So instead of starting with the text and looking essentially for illustrations of it, we put these two documents side by side. Not in your course pack, but on the website is an article that I encourage you all to read. You don't really need to read it in order to answer the question set, but you might need to read it to understand what's going on in this class, or at least what's going on in some of your readings, or perhaps make sense of some other things that you have picked up along the way. And it's an article by Israel Finkelstein, who is a professor of archaeology at Tel Aviv University. And it's called Archaeology, Bible, and the History of the Levant in the Iron Age. It's from this book, Archaeologies of the Middle East, Critical Perspectives, relatively new, came out a couple years ago. Like I say, it's on the WebVista site, so you can download it and read it. He does a very nice job of laying out the background and filling in many of the details of what I just said to you in a rather compressed way. Like practically all archaeologists who work in this area, he has an agenda. In many, many other articles and books that he has written, he has been a lot more overt about his agenda. In this, it really doesn't creep in until the second or third to the last paragraph, and so therefore it's better. It's a better account. So I encourage you all to read that. Now, even if the biblical chronology is to be ignored, we know from the archaeological evidence that in around the year 1200 to 1100, around the 12th century BCE, lots of change came to this region. New peoples came. Old places that had been large centers for a long time were destroyed. And it's really a very confusing period. 1200 is the beginning of Iron One, the beginning of the archaeological epoch that we know of as Iron One. And in Iron One, there are three distinguishable groups of people inhabiting this territory. And when I say distinguishable, I don't mean by race. We don't have their skeletal remains. I'm not talking about DNA. I'm talking about how they lived. Where they lived, how they lived, what they did, how they believed, what they believed in terms of the material remains of the rituals that they enacted. And we're going to call these three peoples the Canaanites, Canaanites, the Philistines, and the Israelites. And for the rest of today and in the next 3 lectures, we will look at the material remains of these three peoples and try to see what the archaeology tells us about who they were. We're going to start with the peoples who were already there when Moses or whoever may have been standing on Mount Nebo looking this way. And that's the Canaanites. We're going to look at 5 sites very briefly, just not in great detail. And at the end of looking at some of the remains from these sites, am going to ask you, what do we know about the Canaanites? That is, what are the material correlates of their life? What can we tell from their remains about who they are? So the sites that we're going to look at are Ashkelon, here in the southern coastal plain, Lachish, on the edge of the Shvelah, right between the Judean highlands and the Shvelah. This is the area of the Shvelah. Megiddo, at that pass between the northern coastal plain and the Jezreel Valley. Hatzor, right in between upper and lower Galilee, looking down towards the Jordan River. And Dan, at the northern edge of the Hula, right below the Golan Heights. I'm going to start with Ashkelon. Do you have Ashkelon on your maps? Okay. Ashkelon, a huge city, a series of excavation projects, the largest of which has been by Harvard University over the last 25 years. But even so, only a tiny fraction of the city has been excavated. One of the problems with getting to these earlier periods is that everything else is on top of them. And that's been the case at Ashkelon. So there's not that much from the Bronze Age in its at its original levels that have been found. But there are a couple quite spectacular finds in one field. Inside the enormous ramparts, and you see here, these are man-made earthen ramparts from the Bronze Age of the city of Ashkelon. And when I say Bronze Age, I mean just generically Middle and Late Bronze Age, so second millennium, first 8 centuries of the second millennium, or from around 1900. So you see here these enormous earthen ramparts. And how did you get into the city with such enormous earthen ramparts? There was a monumental, defended, chambered gateway made out of mud brick. Mud brick was the easiest material to hand to build with. There are not lots of woods in the area of the Central Plain, not lots of trees growing here, not stone. It's not easy to find stone. What there is, dirt. I mean, the clay dirt of the coastal plain. And from it, mud bricks were created. And you can see the individual mud bricks in the side pylons of this enormous gate, arranged in a sort of decorative pattern, as you can see here on the edge. And what's left is, what we have intact is this part of the gate, but because of the arrangement of the mud bricks at the upper sectors here on the sides, it's clear that they were making an arch. This is actually a true arch. For all of you that have studied Roman architecture and have learned that it was the Romans that invented the arch, that's not true. The true arch, was actually invented in the Near East in the second millennium, and there are other examples besides that at Ashkelon, including some in Mesopotamia. One of the leitmotifs of my life is to constantly remind everybody that everything started in the East. There's nothing practically in the classical world that didn't already start in the East. So here's just the first of what will be many things like that. So this monumental mud brick gate. And when the Ashkelon excavators were cleaning out a portion just inside one of the chambers inside the gate, they found a small terracotta vessel with a doorway in it. And inside was this silver calf, which I have the size of here someplace. 4.5 inches long and 4 inches high. So pretty small. A small silver calf found inside this, clearly a sort of guardian deity. Not a deity per se, but a manifestation of a deity. a deity here appearing in an animal form, and the animal form is bovine. All the way in the north at Tel Dan. Here you see an aerial view again of the site. Here a drawing of a topographical plan of the site. These are the excavation areas. This gives you a sense. Let's see, excavations at Dan. Dan is the longest running excavation in Israel, the longest continuous running excavation in Israel. Excavation started here in the 1960s. They have gone on every year since then. I mean, there are digs that started a long time ago, but this is the longest continuously running one. And even with that amount of excavation, this is the amount that's been excavated over the whole mountain. So for all of you who wonder why we still do this, we have not even cracked the surface of what there is to find. Okay, in this area here, area K, which is actually right here on one edge of the mound, the excavators found remains from the Middle Bronze Age, just like from Ashkelon. Those remains were from the Middle Bronze Age. And here, too, they have found a mud brick gate, a vast gate. Here you see flanking towers and the doorway in. You can easily see the individual mud bricks. They are preserved. The gate here is preserved to a height of 7 meters. And the courses preserved of the mud brick alone are 47 courses of preserved mud brick. Here's a plan of the gate. The interior of the Ashkelon gate is like this as well. This is what I mean by chambers. This is a double-chambered gate. You entered, and there were then these wide chambers on two sides, and then you could come through. This is obviously in part for defense. Defenders could be inside here. The actual entranceway is small, so it would be easy to overman anybody who was trying to get in. There are over 20 steps coursing up here inside. And this structure, which you see here in reconstruction, was actually not used for very long because you may recall what I told you about the climate of these zones. So down in Ashkelon, it makes sense to build a gate out of mud brick, but up here in the rainy north where there are actual winters and it's wet predictably every single year, this is a ridiculous material to make a defensive fortification out of. It melts. And in fact, the people who lived here quickly found that out, and after about 50 years filled it in, and they built another gate system on the top using more wood and some stone and also some mud brick. So this gate wasn't actually used for very long. But in terms of size and importance in the site, it's the equivalent of the Ashkelon gate. Oh, so you might wonder why people built a gate out of mud brick here when it was such a unlikely material. And the reason is probably that the people who lived here and built it came not from here, but from a zone where it was a lot easier and more regular to build things out of mud brick, and that's likely Mesopotamia or northern Syria, where there are no trees and very little stone, and everything is built out of mud brick, and there are not rainy winters like there are here. So they got here and they built this, and then didn't work out all that well, but they did. Okay. Going back down to the south, Lachish, another gigantic site. These sites, with their large sloping sides, are the products themselves of Middle Bronze Age engineering. That is, these, like the rampart at Ashkelon, if you would dig away the grassy covering of the edge of Lachish, you would come across an artificially built up fortification or mound made out of stone and dirt and tumble that was put in to build up the site. So the site as a whole, this large, elevated, protected expanse, is a product of the Canaanite engineering. Here at the site of Lachish, there was a kind of moat on one side, and in the area of the moat was a temple. And it's called the Phasi Temple. Phasi is a word that's sometimes used for an area that's a moat. And you see here a plan and a reconstruction drawing and a view. The views of these poor things are always so, well, not always, but they're frequently a little pathetic. The views, overgrown, and of course the superstructure is completely gone, so you just have the foundations, and it looks very uninspiring, to say nothing of small. But originally there were stone walls, as you see here, and there would have been a mud brick superstructure, mud bricks going up to make the higher walls. So there was an antechamber that you could walk in from the entrance, and then a large central room, benches on the sides. You see here in the drawing, a kind of shrine in the back with little steps, columns holding up the roof beams, so that you could have this wide expanse of hallway. And so this person is standing in the area of the central hall right here. So you might be curious as to who this was for, this shrine. Oh, I forgot I was going to show you that. Here is a drawing of the little niche in the back. A view of the little niche in the back. In the ruins of the Phasi Temple at Lachish was found this vessel. This vessel is a small jug. Sometimes these jugs are called, I'm just telling you this because you think you're going to find this in your reading. They're called ewers, E-W-E-R. That's just a crossword puzzle word for jug. Now you will be good with the Tuesday New York Times crossword puzzle. And there's some dark painted decoration on the jug, on the ewer, some heraldic animals, and then some writing. And the writing is legible for reasons that I'm not sure I'll get to be able to explain to you today, but we'll be able to explain to you next time. But I can tell you anyway what it says. It says it's got an inscription that reads from left to right, and here is the beginning of it. This is essentially a mem, a tau, or a taf, and a nun, a matan, which is somebody's name, and then some sort of punctuation. And then the rest of the inscription, which ends here in this drawing and is an offering to Aleph, Lamed, Taf, Eilat. Eilat is the feminine version of a deity known as El. El is a deity that's known from the Hebrew Bible, among other places. A male, usually associated with sky, the ability to control the weather, storm god. And this is the female version of El, suggesting that there is some sort of a pantheon, or at least a group of deities headed by both a strong male and a strong female. And this little vessel is an offering to that female. So this little vessel tells us that they could write, that they had an alphabet, because this is an alphabetic script, and that the writing was sometimes employed in the service of making an offering to a deity, and at least one part of the pantheon. The writing on the little ewer from Lachish is a kind of writing that we can fix in time and space in terms of the development of the alphabet, because we have texts slightly earlier than that from a site down here in the Sinai Peninsula called Sarabat al-Qadim. So Lachish is right about there in Israel, and this site, Sarabat al-Qadim, is right about here in the Sinai. The relationship of those texts to the Lachish ewer and the implications of that for who the Canaanites were and what else we know about them will be something that we'll start with on Thursday. See you then.